Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for joining ASMGi, Acreto, and Flexential for this webinar on Secure Access Service Edge. We have a terrific panel discussion today, and it's going to be interactive. And we want the audience to participate as much as you want. So if you have any questions or comments or anything you want the panel to address, feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to your question or comment as soon as possible. I'm going to turn this out now over to Steve Racing, President and CEO of ASMGi, and Steve will kick off the webinar. Take it away, Steve.
Great, thank you, Paul. Thanks everyone that's attending the webinar today for sharing some of your time with us, and thank you to the panel who I'll introduce shortly. I do want to mention some housekeeping items before we get started. And Paul already talked about using the QA box to enter any questions, but the nature of today's discussion, we want to keep it very interactive. And if you have a question, please ask it, and we'll stop what we're talking about and drill into the question, or if it's something that we're going to address later in the slides, or something that's better fit for later, we'll probably push it off. But in any event, that said, let me introduce the panel because we have a great panel today as well. I'm Steve Racing, President and CEO of ASMGi, as Paul mentioned. And ASMGi is a full stack technology company. In the spirit of full disclosure, we are partners with both Flexential and Acreto. So we have two partners on the call today. Our goal, that I should tell you that our goal is not to sell you a product, but really to solve a problem. So I intend for this to be very interactive, and everybody in the audience should leave with something, right? There should be a nugget for everyone. So if you have a question, please ask it. Why don't you go ahead? So I have Derek Seiler from Flexential with me, and Babak from Acreto. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Derek? Go ahead.
Stephen, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Seiler. I'm a solution architect for Flexential, and I focus on our channel ecosystem, including ASMGi, and go out and talk to folks about our kind of core value proposition at Flexential. And what we're in the business of doing at Flexential is helping customers in the mid-market and enterprise embrace hybrid multi-cloud. So that's intelligent workload placement, from core to edge, and enable edge strategies in the deployment of their workloads in their application environments, and how they're meeting the need of this new technology and new way to engage with their customers.
Cool. 40 data centers across the country. So that's an important piece of information as well. Go ahead, Babak.
Hi, I'm Babak Pazdar. I'm CEO and CTO for Acreto. To Acreto, we're focused on addressing the complexity, the efficacy, and the cost challenges associated with security, and most importantly, creating a model where security can operate in line with the way organizations work today versus traditional security approaches.
Awesome. Cool. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we'll do some introductions and a session overview. We've done a bit of the introductions already, and we'll talk about some general information as it relates to edge computing, and then including defining edge computing, right? So, and then we'll ask the speakers some specific questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And then we'll conclude the session today with some closing remarks. So, that said, let's dig in. So just some general information on the edge. The first thing I want to address is, what is the edge and why are companies moving to it? Any thoughts about that, Derek?
So I think you see, kind of on the slide here, a lot of what's taking companies into the edge, right? So I look at this and I interpret things like telehealth, distance learning, smart cities. What we see at Flexential, right? Because we're in the business of data centers and infrastructure outsourcing and private cloud and connectivity to the hyperscale. So that whole concept of intelligent workload placement. The use cases that are in play today are all about, doing more intelligent traffic routing. So riding our fiber network backbone from core to edge, up to the hyperscale, being able to choose best of breed between public and private connectivity, to do so securely, and then to be out of the business of managing their own data centers and be able to deploy, smartly where they're going to host their production workloads. But ultimately, there's this whole kind of next gen set of use cases that are being enabled by things like IoT and 5G. That are all going to be about, how do, city planners more intelligently route traffic flow and public services, how do, folks in the healthcare space address, telehealth and underserved remote communities that might have the same sort of access that you would have in a more suburban or city environment, in things like distance learning, right? So it's basically all about bringing the computer processing, which we would host on our platform, closer to the edge, to make more intelligent insight in real-time analytics out of the data that resides at the edge.
Awesome. Yeah, Babak, any thoughts?
Well, where the use case is the edge, the challenges with regard to integrity, privacy, availability of the systems data and the applications is that traditional security does not work. It represents a whole new model that encompasses a wide variety of diverse technologies. And we are more diverse now than ever with regard to the technologies we deal with, not only in terms of how applications are delivered, but also in terms of how systems data and applications are accessed. So the traditional security model not only requires many products from many vendors that require many experts, and these experts are not only hard to find, but they're even harder to keep. But it creates a complexity, and ultimately it's not in line, and it's out of tune with what organizations need to secure their edge infrastructure and the entirety of the hybrid infrastructure end to end. And that represents a challenge. So where companies are moving to the edge to address specific use cases, they are also creating gaps, and some of these gaps just can't be addressed with traditional approaches to security.
Yep, I hear you. And I should say it's worth noting that, today's webinar is really about edge computing and SASE in general. And SASE technologies, SASE means secure access service edge. And so it's really how to secure the data center gets involved in a lot of the infrastructure stuff, and the new technology that you mentioned, Babak, is really relevant as it applies to securing applications that are on the edge, and I think that's really relevant, and these kind of things. I sum it up this way: basically, people move to the edge for one of two reasons, right? To get closer to their customers or to get closer to the source of the data. The items that are generating the data today. So all of these things that both of you said are very true, right? So IoT is pervasive today, and we see a lot of IoT devices generating data, right? So just the sheer quantity of the data is too much for traditional networks to really handle. And so we need a new way to look at this and a new way to enable it. Gartner sums it up like this. And this, I should note, it's a very wordy slide, so I don't expect anybody to read all this word, but I want to highlight a couple things from this article. It was written by Gartner, and I think it really exemplifies the movement to the edge and why it's so important. But one thing I'll say is we can, if you request the slides, we will send them to you, right? So you don't have to read all this now. You can just request the slides and read it back. But here are the things that I thought were most relevant as applies to this article, right? The number of Internet of Things or IoT devices is is predicted to triple between 2020 and 2030. It's just phenomenal how many devices. I've heard various different numbers, like 50 billion by 2020. Imagine that triple. That's 150 billion devices. I just, it's mind-boggling how much data we're talking about creating. So what Gartner says is exactly what you said, Babak. In order to handle this, we need to look at a new architecture, right? We need to look at new ways to really address the challenge, the latency, and just even having the capacity to move that much data to a centralized model. And so this is, I think edge computing is a decentralized model. It's very distributed in nature, and that's the trend that we're in right now. So anybody that's old like me has been through this before, these various different cycles. We see an ebb and flow between centralization and decentralization, and edge computing is a decentralized model, and that's kind of the trend that we see right now. So what Gartner goes on to say is to face the scalability issues related to this model, that it creates a value problem, a latency problem, a bandwidth problem, and a cost problem. Right? So edge computing theoretically can handle or address each of these issues or challenge areas. And we hope that we're able to really help everybody, make better decisions and understand what's going on in the world around them. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and you guys both mentioned this concept of digital transformation. Every industry is going through it in some way, shape, or form, right? Digital health, for healthcare, manufacturing 4.0, for the manufacturing environment, and those every industry is going through it. We see smart light bulbs, smart thermostats, all kinds of, HVAC. These guys, would say, hey, I'm putting in a new furnace. It's smart today. The thermostat is smart. Everybody wants to be able to turn their lights on, and those kind of things. So what Gartner says is that digital transformation necessitates extending it to a distributed digital enterprise, right? So it's really necessitating this movement that we're seeing today with people moving to the edge. And this is a breakdown by industry of tripling the number of IoT devices in the next 10 years, basically, but between 2020 and 2030. So alphabet soup. Edge versus hybrid IT. What do you think, Derek?
I think edge is incorporated within this concept of hybrid, right? So I think what this slide really speaks to is kind of the core value prop of what we do at Flexential. And I'd like to take it back and maybe even tee it up for Babak to kind of carry this point forward. Customers are going to want to, find the right infrastructure for the right workload where it needs to reside. So to give you for example, our customer, sort of our ideal customer profile, is really typified on this slide, right? We're dealing with like the mid-market to enterprise, and all those folks have the legacy of owning their own data center. They ultimately want to, move out of that. The kind of core pain point that we're addressing is, we can move you out of the business of managing and operating your own data centers. We can move you out of the business of managing and operating your own infrastructure, and we can do that in a crawl, walk, run approach, and we can do that from core to decentral to edge, right? All riding on our network. But and this is, I'd like to kind of tee up for Babak to carry forward. One of the things on the previous slides that I think should be called out is one of the challenges around edge is the security, right? It opens up a lot of additional threat vectors. So one of the challenges, you have to kind of rethink how you architect your security posture, right? Gone are the days where you can think about your security posture in that traditional sort of north-south, protect the egress points. Everything on the inside of the fort is safe. Everything on the outside of the fort is not safe, right? Now you've got, this whole concept of zero trust, and what do I do for my applications and my workloads when these devices, by the way, that doubling or tripling that Gartner's predicting, all of those devices are software enabled, right? Steve, even at the firmware level. So there is some area that bad actors can penetrate and then ultimately get onto your network. So laying out the network foundation, laying out the infrastructure foundation is just sort of the first base of that pyramid. Then you have to think on top of that, how do I apply that security layer in a model that is, very much not the way customers have been traditionally thinking about the deployment of security.
Cool. Yeah, Derek, thank you. The challenge we have today is that we can't just think about the hybrid infrastructure as application delivery platform. We have to think of it as the complete end-to-end. IoTs certainly have introduced a whole new slate of challenges. And for those of you who think you don't have IoTs, I would check again, because we all do, right? And it could be something as simple as a smart TV, right? So that creates a whole new dynamic. The problem is your traditional security tools, you can't ship product. Sometimes you don't even have control to implement something at the edge from a security standpoint. And you need to be able to deal with that in light of the new way that organizations are working, the new hybrid infrastructure model. But you also have to look at it from a standpoint of what the access technologies. So you have application delivery technologies and you have access technologies. Access technologies end up being very diverse and very different, right? You look at IoTs, IoTs barely have enough juice to do what they're supposed to do, much less secure themselves. They are purpose-built technologies. In many instances, security does not even exist for these assets. They exist in hostile environments, but more importantly, they exist in hostile networks. And they have privileged access into your infrastructure. So even if there is security tools for IoTs, even if there are security tools for, let's go beyond IoTs, for any of your access technologies, the functions and the application of these tools is very inconsistent. So you have some capabilities with some, other capabilities with others, but you need to deliver security uniformly across your entire hybrid infrastructure, which also includes access technologies. And then there's the other component, which are third parties, right? Not only are technologies diverse today, not only are they distributed and mobile, but almost everything is third party connected, which poses another challenge, where traditional security needs to control what it secures. However, you don't have control over the third party. You don't have control over the third party's security infrastructure. So again, it requires a whole other model to deal with these, where the people who own the access technologies, the people who own the application delivery technologies, the people who manage the access and application delivery technologies, the people who benefit from it, they can all be third parties to each other. And that creates a whole other dynamic, which requires a whole other approach to security to address.
Yep. So it's not easy, but a lot of people are doing it, right? So there is a trend happening right now. And let's talk about some of the use cases. We'll do this for an edge computing, and then we'll also do it for a securing the edge computing. But so Derek, why don't you elaborate a little bit on the use cases in moving to the edge?
Sure. Yeah. So what I like about this slide is it just sort of graphically represents, some of the verticals in some of the use cases that we see emergent in our edge strategy. And just to, again, to briefly reiterate sort of how we're approaching the edge, right? Right now, customers are mostly utilizing us to do better intelligent traffic, intelligent network routing decisions between how am I going to take advantage of co-located data center infrastructure privately deployed cloud infrastructure, or my workloads that are residing on the public cloud, right? In doing that intelligent workload placement, and then riding our fiber backbone between our 40 data centers and our dozen cloud nodes and all the on-ramps to the hyperscale providers. That's what we see today. What we're building for tomorrow, though, is our partner ecosystem that will take us out to these remote locations. So we have partnerships with cell tower providers, for example, that have modular data centers at the base that kind of help to connect that last mile and incorporate fiber into 5G, and that's where we see some of these sort of next use cases coming. There was one that was pretty cool in the middle there. I won't go through all of them. I just kind of tell it more as a personal story, but was gaming. Right. So I was involved as a solution architect on an opportunity. One of our large customers is a professional sports league. And we do a fair amount with the gambling companies as well, right? And they wanted to find ways to bring the application experience to customers of in-game betting, right? So you think about the data that's created at a professional sports venue, right? A lot of video data, it's very heavy, right? And they wanted to create these ancillary applications that really needed these edge clouds, these micro clouds, where you're taking this computer processing closer to where that data is being created, so that you could do things like, real-time gaming, right? So, is the player A going to do this or that? And yeah, we could argue about the morality of, do we really need gambling during the game? But the technical application of that, you need to bring that processing much closer to the edge. OTT, or over-the-top media, right? So these are media companies that are just basically jumping over that traditional cable route to market, right? And bring in direct streaming services, content caching. We're seeing that as well. So in some of these instances, it's not just getting that processing closer to the edge to make better use of that application to capture a new revenue stream like wearables for healthcare providers. It's to solve this latency challenge. Like when you really get into that fourth wave of manufacturing that you're talking about, you're talking about automating potentially supply chains, distribution chains, autonomous vehicles are coming into play. Now latency becomes exceptionally critical, maybe even life-saving, right? So, there are pilot programs running right now of autonomous vehicles in shipping and trucking and in distribution. How long can that that processing command take from the central processor to that autonomous vehicle in order to make an adjustment in speed and distance and what have you? So there's some real-time and really frankly life-saving kind of implications around the latency that we see at the edge. But these are just kind of a couple of the use cases that we see coming down the pike, with IoT and 5G being better incorporated into how customers, particularly in the enterprise, engage with their clients.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things, just kind of queuing up off of something that you said. That's one of the things that I found most interesting about that Gartner report, is that currently latency is the number one reason, right? There's so much data, it would just bog down the current networks, and there would be a lot of latency as a result. And the soon it won't be latency anymore, right? That won't be the problem that we're trying to solve. That'll be an afterthought. The networks will be designed and architected to be able to accommodate larger volumes of data and less latency and those kind of things. But I think the sheer amount of data becomes the number one problem. Eventually, there's so many devices that are generating so much data. Cool. Thank you for that. Babak, let's talk about some of the use cases and how to secure this edge, right? So why don't you go through, I have a few slides here. I think we have eight use cases total, and we'll just kind of toggle through them. But if you could say a few words about those.
Certainly. So obviously work from anywhere. That's interestingly, on September 12th, 13th, and 14th of 2001, I built more VPN tunnels than I'd ever done before throughout my whole career. And all of a sudden, VPNs became viable for enterprises, right? To the point where they didn't even go back to the whole lease line model. Well, COVID drove the work from anywhere approach, where it's tough to get people to want to go back to the office, but it also opened up a whole global workforce and made it easy for organizations to diversify the markets they operate in. So we facilitate that. And very much like what Derek had mentioned, our platform is designed to deliver a local experience to the users, especially when they're trying to go out to the internet or access applications or the application of security, but also be able to leverage that same security infrastructure on a distributed basis so that we're delivering a local experience to all regional users, but we're still interconnecting all of them so they can interoperate together. MPLS replacement, again, very much like what Derek mentioned, organizations are rolling out SD-WANs. There's a problem with that. And the problem is that you have one common SD-WAN architecture for the entire organization. And it's secured by one common security infrastructure. You're building the Great Wall of China around the organization, then you're poking a million holes in it. Right. And it's a very binary approach. If someone's in, they can move laterally. If they're not in, then, obviously they can't. But with all the third parties that are in your environment, there's a lot of people that are in there. And this is where we have moved to a new security model where we deliver a dedicated security infrastructure and a dedicated SD-WAN infrastructure on a per application, per use case, per project, per third party vendor or customer basis. And all of this can operate transparently on the Flexential platform. So we work hand in hand and we operate together. And that drives a level of effectiveness, efficiency, and performance. Same thing with cloud. One security not only secures you and connects your remote users, your data centers, your offices, but also your clouds and even your SaaS platforms, right? Because end-to-end is absolutely key. Securing little bastions of the same application ends up not only being more expensive and more complex, it just ends up being ineffective from a security standpoint because of the complexity. So those are the three scenarios here, and some ways.
I'm going to toggle to the next one, and I'd like you to elaborate on the IoT thing, because we talk so much about IoT being a driver for edge computing and these kind of things. What you want to elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah. So again, the end-to-end includes IoTs, it includes regular computers, it includes management platforms, it includes application delivery, and it includes third parties. We deliver uniform security across all of these technologies. And the way we do it is by eliminating the need to install something locally and by delivering all of the security functionality in the connection. So if the IoT, it doesn't matter how little it is, it could literally be a wearable or it could be a big monster machine that runs in the gigafactory, right? It doesn't matter to us. by moving all of security into connection, it now no longer matters what the technology is. It no longer matters where the technology is, what network or networks they're connected to, because you can have that same technology operating in the office, leveraging one network, at home, leveraging another network, on the road, leveraging yet another, at a customer site, so on and so forth. So doesn't matter what the technology is, where it is, what network it's connected to, or in the case of third parties here, and I'll kind of throw that in the mix, who owns it? In this model, if it's connected, it's secured. If it's not connected, it will not know you even exist. And we can deliver this on a per application, per use case, per third party basis, or whatever model makes sense to your organization.
Cool. Cool. How about compliance?
Yeah, so we have a process we call rapid compliance. I give you a use case. One of our customers was or is a retail operation, and they had to deal with PCI. The challenge was what they needed to secure within PCI was embedded into the rest of their network. Their problem was it would have required re-architecture. We deliver segmentation from the cloud, which means that we can identify and isolate individual assets or groups of assets from the cloud and prevent them from being accessible by the rest of the infrastructure unless you want them to be accessible. All of this can be done without re-architecture or even without buying any products. Everything is all inclusive. So in their case, in a matter of 2 to 3 hours, they were able to isolate their IVR system and their phone system that recorded for quality purposes the customers purchasing products and giving their credit card numbers on the line. And no re-architecture was necessary. We were able to implement with our rapid compliance. And by the way, we've got a paper on this, which I'm sure Steve can make available to you guys. With rapid compliance, within a matter of hours and without re-architecture, they were able to achieve PCI compliance. But it's not limited to PCI. HIPAA, CMMC, or any other compliance requirements are supported.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great story. Security consolidation and reduction.
Yeah, so we eliminate 8 different categories of products, right? And that has a profound impact. Not only do we enable organizations to deliver their distributed hybrid infrastructure, but we consolidate all of that functionality in the connection. What it translates to is eliminating 50 plus management interfaces down to just a handful. And because it's all consolidated, you don't need to worry about data flows that go through one technology, then another, and having to manage them individually and on a one-off basis. It not only do we manage the data flows, but we manage it end to end because the cloud, the SaaS, the data center, the office, the IoT, the remote user, they all are using the same security that you control through a single pane of glass. Yeah. And all of that not only reduces complexity, and complexity is the enemy of security, so it gives you better security, but could you imagine what the savings are when you're eliminating 50 some odd products from the average mid-market organization's infrastructure and consolidating it into a single platform?
Awesome. Yeah, I can imagine it's a lot, right? Let's go through
80% reduction. 80%
awesome.
Reduction. Yeah.
Cool. So here's a question for the panel. what are the most common use cases you see? What, and maybe you can both respond to this, Derek, if you want to go first. What are the most common use cases that you see?
I think, again, right now, intelligent traffic routing in the enablement of multi-cloud, right? So I think we had a slide up a little bit ago that talked about how mid-market and enterprise customers, we hear this all the time, they want to move to cloud, they want to move to cloud, they want to move to cloud. There's no one cloud that's going to work for all of their workloads, right? They need a core to edge strategy for their infrastructure, whether that's their own infrastructure exiting out of the data center, whether that's connectivity for their test dev, their containers, their development environments running in hyperscale, running those clouds adjacent to private cloud deployments for kind of their core line of business, and then out to the edge as well, right? So right now, what we're seeing is utilizing our network and data center fleet to sort of more intelligently route that traffic and take advantage of private versus public transit. And what we see coming, though, we'll be taking that fiber backbone that we're able to provide customers all the way out to remote locations, incorporating a variety of trusted third-party, vetted third-party ecosystem partners that can then take advantage of things like modular databases at the base of cell phone towers that can get very remote deployment of infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, we're in the delivery business of that infrastructure to bring that processing closer to the applications or to the customers and the data that resides at the edge. So I think what we'll see is enterprise customers begin to engage more creatively with their customers utilizing these edge technologies, and they're going to have these host of solutions, or I should say pain points around how do I deploy that, right? Is it latency? Is it security? Is it proximity? And so forth, right? So I think those use cases that will probably be most common to get spun up, probably an awful lot around retail and point of sale, right? There's a tremendous amount of data that you can do better, real-time insights and analytics with if you have an effective edge strategy, opening up these new revenue streams for things like wearables, right? So now you're getting into the telehealth kind of applications, creating new ways to engage with your customers on an ongoing basis if you're in that space. And then I think manufacturing 4.0, which was kind of alluded to, right? The complete computerization of the manufacturing experience and the integration of the supply chain with manufacturing, and not only incorporating robotics and computer technology into manufacturing environments, but really even using things like AI and machine learning to do sort of the continuous improvement components of it as well, right? Not just sort of automating the grunt work, if you will, but also the sort of ongoing improvements of that manufacturing environment. And
preventative maintenance is one of the primary use cases in that paradigm of manufacturing 4.0, and the preventive maintenance has been around for multiple decades, easily 3 at least. But I think we've gotten a lot better at creating data, right? So that's really the problem that we're trying to solve, is how to deal with all that data, right? But it is a big part of that movement. I agree. How about you, Babak, from a security standpoint? What trends are you seeing?
So 86% of the organizations out there don't trust their security infrastructure. So they're backstopping it with cyber insurance. The challenge is that cyber insurance is getting clobbered, where 72 cents out of every dollar they earn goes to ransomware payouts. So this, and by the way, these are for their not at-risk customers. They're just outright rejecting at-risk customers. So as organizations become more distributed, as they roll out across the hybrid infrastructure, as they recognize that the traditional security models are unable to protect them, when cyber insurance companies turn around and say, hey, you are at risk because of this new model and you don't have any security in place. This is where cyber insurance companies turn to Acreto and say, look, we've got at-risk customers who need to be insured, and we're going to reject them. But if we ask Acreto or ask them to implement Acreto as part of the contingency or subjectivity, so contingent on or subject to you implementing Acreto, we will insure you. So that has been one of the biggest use cases where cyber insurance companies turn to us to address the gaps. So the nice thing is that we've taken that 72% loss ratio, which applies to their not at risk customers, and we've turned it to 0% loss ratio for their at risk customers. So it's a very dramatic difference between organizations struggling to secure themselves. And look, cyber insurance companies, for the mid-market, the average ransomware payout is anywhere between $500,000 to $20 million, right? So they are literally putting their money on the line based on the efficacy of what we have. And you know, a lot of these guys evaluated us for 9 months to 13 months prior to rollout. So that is the number one use case for us, helping organizations become insurable. And it spans a wide variety of scenarios. There's hundreds of causes for declination, which the cyber insurance companies have, and you know we address.
Yeah,
I would imagine, if I may, just add to that, Babak, I would imagine this is a huge problem from cyber liability, uninsurability, for compute in a central and regionalized model, and it's only going to be magnified even more as it moves out to the edge and additional threat vectors for bad actors to, you know, penetrate networks and infect infrastructure.
Yeah,
well,
I agree. I agree, Derek.
The challenge a lot of these organizations have is that once they're rejected by a cyber insurance company, the requirements become significantly higher in order for them to meet the burden to satisfy it. And you know, in many instances, the cyber insurance companies come back and say, we're only going to give you 50% coverage, where you have to assume the other half of the risk, or we will not give you complete coverage for everything you need secured. And that's a challenge, especially when they have major contracts on the line that require the liability protection.
Yep, agreed. And I think the attack surface is really going to increase with this move to the edge, as you suggested, Derek. Right, as we introduce IoT devices that are insecure by nature, and OT devices, and especially legacy OT devices, right? So, hey, I wanted to talk real quick about this and just mention, we did a webinar back in December of 2021. It was December of last year, but it was specific around Executive Order 14028. But a couple of the concepts that came out of that executive order, which was designed to protect our critical infrastructure, right? How do we protect our nation's cybersecurity? And so there were a couple things I'll say that really showed up a lot in that specific executive order. We had a hospital, call them an owner operator, and a provider, an OEM from a process control standpoint, Rockwell Automation and Cleveland Clinic, on this webinar. But we talked specifically about a couple of things that showed up a lot throughout that executive order 14028. And they were, you know, like zero trust security and software bill of materials. Those are the things that really resonate with me a lot. And I think from an OT standpoint, it's very critical. As you mentioned, Babak, there are a lot of third parties on your network and various different things, right? From a maintenance standpoint, you name it, there's a lot of risk associated with that. But also from an IT, IoT and an OT perspective, just having that firmware, that software development lifecycle to deal with and embedding security into that and flushing out vulnerabilities that exist on those devices in the software even. Are there any executive orders that are specifically about moving to the edge, or is there any concepts that you think really are important for people to consider as they embark on this journey to the edge? Either of you is fine. What do you think?
Well, I'll answer the first part of it, Stephen, and maybe tee it up for Babak to continue. So in the core of what we do, right, around this concept of intelligent workload placement, right, and customers embracing hybrid multi-cloud. We have in our private cloud offering, for example, an offering where we give a dedicated co-managed vCenter server, right? So we're big in the VMware sort of sphere in workloads that are operating in VMware. And those are those traditional workloads you saw, if you go back to that slide, that had the enterprise and mid-market and their embrace of data center and SaaS and private cloud and public cloud, right? So we're sort of the easy button from the infrastructure perspective to move those workloads so they can exit their corporate data center, they can get into a resilient network-rich facility, and then they can build out their infrastructure architecture and their network architecture from there. And we can enable this concept of zero trust, right? Which sort of takes that logical next step forward from the traditional way that many customers were thinking about their security architecture. Just point, that traditional kind of north-south, right? Protect the points of egress. Everything on the inside's good. Everything on the outside's bad. Now you have to be able to control the lateral fire, right? And we're talking about cybersecurity liability, right? Those phishing scams and other things that penetrate, a malware that penetrates that network through a trusted actor, right? As somebody that has access into that system, and then that fire spreads laterally. So the way that we do it and help enable customers to architect for zero trust is we give that private cloud experience with that co-managed vCenter server so they can integrate all this third-party technology, because we're going to be in the business of delivering the right infrastructure for the right workload. We're going to make sure that VM is on, available, accessible, on a resilient network backbone, but then we're really going to depend upon the customer's preference and third-party technologies, how they want to manage that, and then ultimately secure that.
Yep, I'm going to keep moving, Babak, in the spirit of time, but I wanted to ask you about SASE Plus, and so that the platform that you're talking about that Acreto has is SASE Plus, and SASE is I'll say an industry-specific technology, and you call it SASE Plus. What you do? Can you explain what that really means?
Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick to dovetail on what Derek said previously, I want to make sure that folks realize that all of these mandates around achieving zero trust is not the security destination that sometimes people make it out to be. Zero trust, that mandate kind of gets you to mediocrity, but obviously there's so much more that can be done. So this is where our platform layers transparently in line with Flexential's platform to give you a zero trust environment per application, per use case, per third party or so. But to answer the question, SASE is a technology that's very focused on securing the communication between access technologies and application delivery technologies. They don't secure the application delivery technologies. They don't secure the access technologies. They secure the communication in between. SASE Plus, and this is where we see ourselves as a complete security infrastructure versus something that performs a granular security function. SASE Plus delivers the entire end-to-end across all of an organization's technology silos. So we secure the access technology, we secure the application delivery technology, and we secure the communication in between. And then we take it one step further to deliver a isolated, dedicated security infrastructure per application, use case, project, third party, and whatever else makes sense to the organization. So we are taking a embrace and extend. Yes, we're putting ourselves in the SASE category, but it's the succeeding generation security to both SASE and traditional security models.
Awesome. Great explanation. Appreciate that. That's Derek, I want to touch on this a little bit. We posted a blog to ASMGi's website. Flexential wrote the blog, and it talks about 7 components of building an edge strategy. And just for the benefit of the attendees today, why don't you talk about what really goes into building an edge strategy?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to post that. That came out of our CINO, or Chief Innovation Office, and our Chief Innovation Officer really believes in that whole, kind of third wave concept, right? What we're developing out of the CINO team is not where we are today, but where we're going to want to be in 2 to 3 years. So a lot of the concepts that I talked about are how we're ultimately building out that edge strategy. So today we're in the business of delivering, centralized, regionalized, and then out to the edge infrastructure, networking, and managed services to help customers exit out of their corporate data center, and move into a resilient third-party data center, and then take advantage of optimal workload placement, whether that's in co-location, whether that's in private cloud, whether that's in the public cloud, with underpinning network services always on, and 5 nines of high availability in their cloud deployments, and then always on, power and resilient facilities, right? However, I think that the strategies or main components of developing an edge strategy really start with number 1. And I don't want to go through all 7 of them because your viewers can download the blog there, but it's develop those service offerings that take advantage of edge deployments, right? So all these mid-market enterprise customers, you have all this wonderful data that's residing at the edge. You've got customer engagements that and insights and analytics that you can glean out of that. You've got new ways to engage with your customers that require these sort of edge technology deployments that make you stickier with your customers, make you more engaged with your customers. You can optimize your distribution through the deployment of edge technology. You can streamline and route optimize and basically tap into new potentials to engage with your customers and find new revenue by deploying some of these technologies at the edge. However, in order to do that, you're going to have to think through the layers at an infrastructure component, at a networking component, and then ultimately, and I would say probably most importantly, to kind of maybe tee this up for Babak, at a security layer, right? Because you are introducing multiple threat vectors. And you have to have a security all the way at the very far edge, because that is a potential point of entry into your protected network.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it from a cost standpoint is drop the non-critical data, right? So a lot of models in this centralized models where you have a data lake, you port all the data back to the data lake and analyze it later in a batch, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the premise of edge computing is more
bring the processing closer.
It's bring the processing closer to the data and do real-time stream analysis, right? So bring the data through and keep the important stuff and throw away the stuff that's not important, instead of spending the money to traverse the network and store it and replicate it and do all those things that you need to do from a data standpoint. So,
yeah, the latter is very inefficient. Absolutely.
Yep. I appreciate that. I want to get to some audience questions. We have a few minutes left, and let me just kind of go through some of the questions that have come in. What next gen use cases do you see as 5G and artificial intelligence, machine learning? So two technologies that are probably in the hype cycle today. What do you see from a next gen use case with those two technologies? Maybe you can start, Derek, and Babak, you can chime in from a security standpoint.
I think shipping and logistics and distribution will be completely revolutionized, right? I'd see that and I don't even necessarily think that's next gen use case. I think that's happening today, right? Open up, your Uber app, right? And think about all the, the drivers and all those data points, and now you have Uber Eats, right? So somewhere along the line, there was a decision made to, create an entirely new revenue stream out of all of that endpoint data. You will see that again and again and again and again. So I think in, distribution and fulfillment, you're seeing that. And in autonomous vehicles, for example, that is being piloted today. There are companies that are piloting driverless trucks. So I think that will be a very new normal within a few short years. And obviously, an edge network that's very secure and extremely low latency is going to be critical in order to deliver that.
Right. A right turn is more efficient to take than a left turn. So
absolutely.
It's good to know that, right? It's good to know that. How about you, Babak? Some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with Derek in terms of his use cases. We're also seeing banking, and we're also seeing emergency services that are really being impacted, especially scenarios where people just cannot be involved, from a nuclear reactor to scenarios where it's too dangerous for people. These are all scenarios where edge services are effective, not just edge, but being able to deliver a pop-up infrastructure on demand that is also secured. So we are seeing these use cases. And then the other one is banking. We're seeing a huge uptick in security for distributed infrastructures like ATMs. There's a reason you see the vast majority of the major banks have their ATMs in their branches, because that's kind of where the security is, right? They have to secure the branch and the ATM dovetails on it. But a lot of these organizations are getting rid of branches. They're moving to either ATM functionality or mobile branches where they can move to where the people are. You can have that same branch be available at the beach on Saturday morning, and then be available at the Opera House Saturday night, and then at the football stadium the next day on Sunday. So all of this requires a whole new approach to both delivering the compute services and access services, as well as securing them.
Yep. I actually have a question from a banker, right? It says, we are a bank. Do any use cases apply to us? Are you doing or seeing other banks move to the edge, right? I think the ATM, I call it ATM/ITM, right? That use case where a lot of banks are getting rid of physical branches in lieu of having virtual bank tellers, right? Just so having a real person, but a virtual experience. That's what do you think about that, Babak?
Yeah, the ITM is a huge use case because it really requires the edge model because of the interactiveness. The ITM has got the cameras and the microphone, and you can actually exchange, you can actually communicate the same way you do with a teller. But the benefit is there's a centralization of the tellers so that 5 or 10 tellers could cover dozens, if not hundreds of ITMs. So that is one we actually have a fairly detailed write-up about. But also one of the key things to note is that the bank itself is probably the least connected to their infrastructure compared to all the third parties that deliver services to them, from the people who deliver the back-end functionality, to the people who do the cash logistics, to the people who do the card transactions, to the people who do the monitoring and management of the ATM, ITM infrastructure. It has a completely different set of requirements than what has traditionally been the case. So those are some problems that are also addressed.
Yep. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and it's 2:01 already, so I want to get to the closing remarks. Do you have some closing remarks, Derek, based on the topic and the webinar to date? And again, I want to make sure everybody gets the nugget that they came for, and it might come right now. So what do you
Sure.
think?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, we, on behalf of Flexential, appreciate the opportunity to join and speak to the audience. So I think Edge just opens up, wonderful opportunities to engage with your customers in new ways, to gain critical insights with data that's resided at the edge that you may not have had access to before. So opening up new revenue streams, and we at Flexential, can help you get there through giving you the right set of infrastructure, the networking services to take you out to the edge, and then of course
Yep.
on additional security technologies that can secure the edge, right? Because just as it opens up new opportunities, it also opens up new points of risk.
Awesome. Davik, some closing remarks?
Again, on behalf of myself and everyone at Acreto, thank you for the opportunity and the time. Ultimately, the way organizations work today is very different than even a few years ago, and it will continue to evolve. The challenge is that security is a 40-year-old model. Traditional security is a 40-year-old model that is incapable of adapting to the new way organizations work. So we are, helping organizations with a succeeding generation of security to the traditional model to deliver security much simpler, much more effective, much more in tune with the way they work, and much more sustainable. So thank you again.
Yep. Cool. And I want to thank our audience as well as our panel. And thank you guys for your tremendous insights and wisdom. Really appreciate you being here. And I would say as it relates to edge computing, it's real. It's happening, right? These trends, these numbers are not made up. They're really happening, and it's happening right now. And every business is thinking about digital transformation and how to create new revenue models and, get value out of their data, right? And we're generating more data than ever. So it's real, and it's happening right now. And ASMGi, from a business, I'll just close with this. We can bring both of these solutions in a managed fashion to you, so you don't have to really do anything or learn a new technology. And I think there's some value in that as well. And thank you everybody for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you the next time around. And if you want the slides, please send an email in. Here's our contact information, and you probably have it anyway. Our website is www.asmgi. Just send in an email and say, please send me the slides, and we'd be happy to do that. Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.